Okay, we're here for our science salon with Amy Alkon, the author of the new Unfckology, a field guide to living with guts and confidence. It just never fails to amuse me that even publishers don't want to type out full words. And, there's several books now with fuck in the title, including one of your previous ones, Nice People Who Sometimes Say Fuck. I guess it's just the nature of the culture. But just to give you, the full proper introduction here, you work in applied behavioral sciences, writing a science advice column, which you describe yourself as the science advice goddess, which I like, and that you live here in Los Angeles, and you started this column after your experiences in New York City, which I found really quite amusing, of setting up a expert a panel table there, and instead of a three-card Monte scam, you were giving free advice, not even charging. So I guess that made it okay. And anyway, so but before we get into the book, which I really loved, and by way of background, we've done quite a bit on the self-help movement and skeptic, because there's a lot of questionable science, as you know, in the more pop self-help movement. And we did a cover story years ago by a guy named Steve Salerno, who used to work for Rodale Press, and he wrote a book called SHAM, S-H-A-M, Self-Help Actualization Movement. And it isn't that it doesn't work or whatever, it's that when he was working at Rodale Press, the number one predictor of who would buy one of these self-help books is people that had already bought a bunch of these self-help books. So his point was, if it worked, if there was some technique, this one is the one that works, and you did it, then why do you need to buy all these others? And so there's something about just rehearsing through the different techniques. It doesn't really matter which technique it is in that genre. Just doing something has some kind of an effect. So I really like the fact that you don't call it self-help, you call it science help, which of course we love. It's skeptic. And that you're backing whatever advice you give with some studies. And so I want to get into the meat of those, but on the Thursday morning bike ride, our mutual friend Nick Coe said said to ask you about Marlon Brando. So I thought we'd start with a little bit of background, because you grew up in the Midwest, you moved to New York, you had some interesting experiences in New York, then you came to LA, and somewhere the Marlon Brando story fits in there, which I think taps into your personality and how you developed your career.
I actually was a struggling writer in New York, and because of that, it was a little embarrassing to go out with your friends. You go and you show up for dessert when they're out for dinner, and you slip the waitress a $1 for a glass of water. And so I had discovered America Online. Hold on, there's a little dog here. I have to pick her up because she wants to be in.
Oh, that's all right.
Chinese question. Come here, honey. Okay, sit down. Okay, I have to untangle her from the mic cord. And so I started going on. Okay, hold on. We're having dog mic problems. Okay, well, we're gonna just arrange the doggy here. Okay, so I would just go on AOL in these chat rooms every night. And mostly, there were just people who would say awful things to you. And then there was this very, very interesting guy. We started talking. I had no idea who it was. And we developed a friendship. We wrote for like 6 months. And it wasn't some kind of dirty, let me see your undies kind of thing. Hold on, we're having dog issues again. Come on, she'll calm down as soon as she gets, I'm now involved in all of this. So what happened was I was still producing commercials then. I worked at an ad agency. I never intended for that to be my career, but I wanted to go to film school, and to grad film school. My parents thought that was hilarious, being good Midwestern parents. Wait, we're going to pay for you to go to college and watch movies? Yeah, get a job. So I was shooting a commercial out here on the West Coast from New York, and my friend wrote me and he said, I live in Los Angeles. Let's get together. And that's how I found out who I'd been emailing with. But he also found out that I don't care about Hollywood. I don't care about movie stars. And he trusted me, and we were really good friends. And so this is how we became friends. And he was hilarious, loved science. And when he was also a prankster, when I had my car stolen, he called the thief as the Godfather at 3 a.m. because I figured out who the thief was. And
that's great.
Yeah, my mother also called him. And actually, I think that's scarier. But so.
Yeah, Nick was telling me the story that I think you recounted to Joe Rogan. It might have been Joe Rogan, one of the other podcasts, of you charging some phone bank company for your time. These troll calls we all get, at dinner time, and they do rob you of your time.
Yeah, and that's from Good Manners for Nice People who sometimes say fuck. And what I say is that we need to think of rudeness as theft, because then we will become what economists call costly punishers, which I am. And so if you are a person, well, that was a case actually where I benefited. If you are a person who is a costly punisher, you punish the rude at cost to yourself and with no benefit. So if I ask somebody to pipe down in the drugstore, they might shoot me. I'm not going to get a winning lottery ticket from doing that. But in the case of the telemarketers, I have a phone line that I pay for, and they don't get to hijack that in order to interrupt my time, to steal part of my life. And so I actually posted on my blog prices for those annoyance calls. And if you choose to not look at my blog and see if I charge for those horrible calls, that's your problem. So I actually invoiced people who did that when I could track them down and got them to pay me.
That's really funny. That itself, of course, takes some effort. So there's a cost-benefit analysis to investing that much time and effort into doing that and getting your $1 or $5 or whatever you got. But still, it's actually, kind of the point is made, yeah, that that on the other end, if you are somebody who is constantly late, you are robbing somebody else of their time. They're standing there waiting for you because you agreed. And so this is a good argument for, flipping the perspective and see how that feels.
Yeah, I love that as an example for lateness. If you think about it that way, then it really seems mean. Besides the fact that it's unkind to leave somebody sitting there in a restaurant, checking their phone, looking around, that robbery thing is a really good way of looking at it.
Right. So in your little New York City booth where you were doling out advice, what kind of questions were people interested in asking? And by way of background, when we first started Skeptic back in the 90s, we started looking into psychics to do some stories about the phone psychics. And I met this guy, Mark Edward, who worked for the Psychic Friends Network at the time. And he told me that people typically call nights and weekends, and the 4 main reasons they call are love, health, money, and career. And then he'd keep them on the line for, an hours just by kind of going through the different categories. In other words, people have sort of a limited set of things that bothers them that they want to talk to somebody about. And if they don't have a friend or a psychotherapist that charges $200 an hour, whatever, they could go to the Psychic Phones Network, which act sort of like, but not free by any means, because I think it was, $2 a minute or something like that. And it was just basically that kind of stuff. I sense you're in a relationship and one of you's more committed than the other. Oh, how did you know? And, you're thinking of travel, you hate your job, kind of stuff that's true for most people. You must have encountered a lot of these kind of common themes.
There was actually all of those: love, health, money, and career, and then beauty, because we were 3 women dressed up kind of fun sitting on a street corner. And just to explain how this happened, we all worked together in advertising, and we like to make people laugh. And so we thought we would just go sit out on a Soho corner with a sign. I made it because no one makes it quite as badly as I do. And it said, free advice from a panel of experts presented by the advice ladies. And then it gave topics, which were things like love and makeup, also dating, getting rid of your jerk. Jerks are men and women, by the way, stuff like that. And we just thought people would walk past. I mean, we're 3 women with a cardboard sign, but it was New York. The sign said free. People lined up around the block. And so this is how I started. Sorry, we're having dog issues. This is how I started giving advice. It was an accidental career because people would ask us things that actually were sort of weighty questions. And I thought, oh my God, I didn't even take psychology in college. And I started reading through all of psychology, all the books. I wasn't reading journals then, just books. And I thought, oh my God, Freud just made stuff up. This is horrible. And I've always had a love of reason. And so I took that approach in looking at people's psychological problems. I became very interested in Albert Ellis, who was a co-founder of cognitive behavioral therapy, along with Aaron Beck, who kind of did it at the same time. And he actually became a fan of a column I started writing in the New York Daily News. But all along, I have just felt such a need to have science backing what I say, the advice I give, science and reason, but to have especially data-based science. And so it's been a process. This was in the 90s. Actually, it was in the late 80s, we started doing the advice thing, but I began to read much more seriously and go to academic conferences in the 90s and look at stats and methodology. And so I was basically self-taught, an autodidact. And there's benefit to that in that I didn't have a doctrinaire approach. I didn't have all these ideas that professors hammered into my head as correct, many of which in the psych textbooks are actually being shown to be wrong. And that was good. Although, there's always this problem of the people who are meanest to you are journalists if you don't have quote unquote credentials, a PhD. And actually, I was nervous about that. And Albert Ellis himself advised me not to get one. He said in his little Ellis voice, "You know what you need to know? It'd be a waste of time." And I'm really glad I didn't. Although, I find that people automatically assign you credibility for your PhD. And we see now so many studies are not replicating. And, there's some honesty about that. I just saw Michael Inslicht, who's an academic I quote in my book and who helped me a lot on the willpower stuff. And he had a study not replicate, and he tweeted about it. And that's what I love, because I love, as I know you do, science as a process. And we shouldn't have shame that things don't replicate. We should say, wow, this didn't replicate. Let's look at why. And it tells us something. You see, you've made a wrong turn. Okay, now we know not to go in that direction. We'll go in that direction. What was wrong with the methodology of the study? I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, I really like your discussion of Amy Cuddy's research on power posing. I saw her TED Talk when she gave it, and I thought it was pretty interesting. And then then it became like a big thing. Everybody was watching this TED Talk. It's one of the most watched TED Talks. And I thought, oh boy, there's going to be a lot of academics jealous of this, And so sure enough, when the non-replication studies came through, or criticisms of her methodology and so on, she was just pounced on social media, like get lost, drop dead, don't ever do research again, and nothing like, hey, we should figure out what you did wrong, or what parts were right and what parts were wrong, or if we're going to replicate it or whatever. And I think that's part of the problem. It's good that we have social media in the sense that we can pass along articles to read, and academics and scientists get much broader readership now. But on the other hand, the penalties for being wrong like that are pretty severe.
Well, I thought in her case that, not everybody was just mean. Some people were constructive. Yuri Simonson was one of them, that Data Colada blog. They looked at what was wrong.
Yeah, that's good.
There was meaningful stuff where people looked at what was wrong. But what I say in the book is that, okay, here's this replication by Ava Rainhill, but there was stuff wrong with that too. And so, and this is this thing, I find that there's a desire for people to go like, yeah, you suck. And that's just, it's antithetical toward the thing I was talking about with Michael Inslicht saying, oh, this didn't replicate. There shouldn't be this shame at it if you look at it in that way and say, okay, we got something wrong. Whoops. The science is complicated and it's not always going to be perfect. And the statistical methodologies people are using now, there's a lot of complex stuff going on. The arguments about p-values and everything is significance. And so the thing is to look at, okay, Ava Rainhill did this replication. What I say is, okay, in the first case, they posed the people, the participants. A person came in and dealt with them. And then Rainhill's replication, they had a computer pose them. And this is about confidence. So we are not confident in a vacuum. That's the problem with the Rainhill replication. And there were problems with Cuddy, Kearney, Yap study. And in fact, I'll tell you a little bit of in baseball stuff. At I think it was the 2015 SPSP, that's the Society for Personality and Social Psychology conference, huge conference. Dana Kearney, who was one of her co-authors, presented stuff. And I went up afterward. I didn't know her. And I was telling her I looked at their study and I had some problems with it. And I thought, this is so rude, because people in evolutionary psychology, they fight. There's much more fighting. They're much less polite. And I think that's a good thing. People stand up and, say, I think that's really wrong at a conference. And they're more polite, as I was saying, in social psychology. So when I said I have some problems with this, she reached over and hugged me. And I thought, oh, my God, I really didn't expect that. And so when people were saying, I think it was like September of 2017, oh, she's just coming out now with problems. she actually, to me, had misgivings long before that, but she just didn't voice them because maybe you have a friend and a co-author and you don't want to do that. So anyway, I looked at all of that. I looked at the Rainhill replication, which had some good points. And then I looked at Joe Cesario and Melissa McDonald, some work they did on context, because context is really important. And that's one of those questions where something doesn't replicate. I think often we should look to context. Not always, it depends on the study, but are you testing for confidence in an environment where there's no other human being? And so what would they have? I'm not confident with my computer alone, with my lamp. So
right.
That's the question. And we do see, with the stuff with testosterone that they didn't find in the replication, we do see effects for testosterone. Alan Mazur is a researcher who's found them. I write about those. And so, but
let's back up a second.
Sure.
Doing a power pose, initially it was thought that this changes the response people give to you and how they respond to you in, say, a meeting or something like that. And that part was not replicated, but the part that it makes you feel better or more confident was replicated. Did I get that right?
They didn't measure other people. It wasn't other people who were measured, but it was your own responses. And actually, I find for reasons of context, I actually find the whole thing sort of moot, because this idea that you can just, hey, stand tall and speak from your diaphragm and all this stuff I already forgot to do all that stuff. All that stuff. If you do all of that, you're remembering all that stuff, we get what's called cognitive overload. So you're remembering how to stand and how to talk and all this other stuff. And you're supposed to pitch this guy on your great idea for your startup. And your mind just craps out because you can't handle all that stuff, remembering all that at once. And so being an applied scientist, I feel always a little funny calling myself a scientist because I think people say, Jacques, you're not a scientist, you're a writer. But I put all this science together. What I realized is that we need some a way to practically exercise, basically to have training wheels for being confident. And I came up with that. So it's not fake it till you make it. But what I figured out was that you need to impersonate your way to the real you, basically by acting like a confident person when you need that. If you're really timid and fearful and live in fear, that's what I did actually when I was timid and living in fear. I acted like my very confident boss, Kathy DeToro. She's very cool and calm in any situation like that. So I'm talking like her and moving like her, at least as I perceive, because I'm a terrible actress. But you have a package of ideas of how somebody else is. And so you just put on that whole package and then you say your piece. And so you're not remembering all that stuff. And this is a big secret to how to basically unfuck yourself, how to start practicing living with confidence, which increases your ability to do that and makes that more your default behavior than the wimpy behavior you came in with.
Right. So the idea is that it becomes second nature for you to stand taller, speak from the diaphragm. So you're no longer thinking about it, so that when you go into the meeting to pitch it and you have your 6 points, you're only thinking about the 6 points. You're already just standing there straight and changing your voice and so on as a second nature.
Well, what happens is it's really a form of exposure therapy that you go out there, and exposure therapy is basically doing what you're afraid of. So you see that your fears are stupid. So I explain things in the least scientific way because I like everybody to get it. Your fears are dumb. There's a woman, she's so great, Michelle Krasky. She's the primary researcher now on exposure therapy. Therapists mostly do it the old way, which is not as effective. Foa and Kozak are the people behind the old way. But she has people show up at 3 o'clock at UCLA who are afraid, they're claustrophobic, and she locks them in a closet. I don't know how she gets people to show up for their appointments. And she has people come hold spiders and maybe take an elevator with a spider. It must be a fun building. But through this, she shows people through repeated interactions and through use of research on learning and memory that their fears are dumb. And over and over and over, as you experience this, you basically, the way I put it is you get bored with your fears, but you really see that your fears are stupid and you start to be able to do the things you're afraid of. And that's so cool.
This has to be done systematically, right? You don't just lock somebody in the room initially. You have to like show them a picture of a little room and get them close to the little systematic desensitization, right?
Yeah, they do. Right. They do stuff in steps. I would imagine, I can't quite remember, but I think because she has so many papers I read, but I would guess they show you a picture of a spider, and they have you talk about some of your fears and list them. And the way that I did this, I came up with this idea actually of impersonating your way out of your fears, just out of desperation, before I started reading science or anything other than as just a casual thing, but not as a practical career. I was just a loser living in New York. Everybody used me to move when they were moving. And then I was moving and I really needed help. And everyone was in bed with a hangnail or, oh, I have a really urgent trip to the Hamptons. It was really horrible. And I thought, I have no real friends. I was crying in the middle of the street, moving my computer on a cart the wheel fell off of. And I was just desperate to change. So I saw that there were people in my life who could be disagreeable even and have people respect them and still like them and nothing bad happened to them. So I started acting like them, like my old boss, Kathy, like my other boss, Ed. I just behaved like them when I was in a store and somebody was trying to, well, okay, we're not going to give you the rest of that change or whatever the problem was. And I saw that basically nobody chased me out with a broom. The sky didn't open up a claw, didn't come seize me. And so it showed me that I could start behaving this way. I shed those people, those personas, and you just do them a little bit. You don't go around as this person all the time. But I shed those people and started doing that as me. And the important thing to be honest about is that even now, so I'm 54, I've been doing this a long time, but I'm like 80-20. So 80% of me is I am powerful. I am badass. You're doing something rotten in my neighborhood. I'm going to come out and, shine a night watchman flashlight on you. And my boyfriend will be worried they'll be dead. But 20% of me will be at a party and think like, I have nothing to say. I should leave. And the great
I don't
thing
belong here. I'm a loser. Back to loser, Amy.
We all think that. And the cool thing is that the 80% goes, oh, don't be an ass, Alkon. And that's actually something from the book. Talking to yourself in the third person gives you distance and it's more helpful than just thinking I should stay.
By the way, the book, I initially read it in audio, and I like the humor better in audio because hearing it, the pacing and the patter of the sentences themselves, I don't think of myself as writing much humor at all. I don't know how you do it. And I'm curious. So just to go back a little bit on the writing of this book, it's really an extension of your own personal experiments from loserhood to where you are now, as well as your column. You write a weekly column in which a lot of this comes up. So to what extent are you able to apply these things to yourself, and it works anecdotally as well as experimentally?
Right. Well, that's what's important. I mean, for me, that there are good experiments that show, okay, this works. And I want to say, too, because I was terrified, I'll put this piece of research in the book and it won't replicate, because we were starting the replication crisis in the middle of when I was writing this book. But what I try to do, I'm informally coached by a friend who is an epidemiologist and a statistician. He yells at me. It's horrible. But I learned to look for a body of research that has the same finding, and so, it's like, oh, that sample size, oh, that makes me a little sick. But, I try not to use those studies, but also when there's a lot of research that shows the same thing. And we see this in EvPsych. A lot of people like to criticize EvPsych, but there's a lot of cross-cultural mating research that shows the same thing. And you see people in EvPsych. I really see that field. They're really trying to be better in a way I wish social psychology would. There's a guy named Dan Kruger at University of Michigan, and he gets samples from the community. All his participants aren't 22-year-old college students.
Real people.
Real people. Some of them are even poor. Some of them don't have college degrees. And so you're seeing, it's that, and then you see people, they do research on the Tsimane or somebody, and you see the same effects that we see in American college students. So you feel a little bit better about the study where they surveyed, 300 college students and got this certain response.
Right.
I'm not sure if I answered your question because
that was in the right direction. And playing off the power posing thing, because it's a good, well-known study that gets us into other related subjects and why the self-esteem movement failed back in the 80s, because the ideas by themselves aren't going to cut it. You have a discussion of the extended mind, which is the rest of your body. So the idea of power posing is that it's your whole body has to be engaged in changing your attitudes, not just somebody tells you you're special, you look in the mirror and say, I'm special. You actually have to do something, physically do something to change your thoughts in the long run.
The way I put this is the crux of the book. So the crux of the book is that the mind is bigger than the brain. And this goes back to I was going to say Henry James, his brother, William James. And basically what therapists tell you to do, which is very much in their interest, and not all therapists are bad. I'm not knocking all therapists. That would be irrational of me. But therapists have you come in and whine about your problems every week. And some will have you do some version of exposure therapy, but often it's the old kind because people often don't read after they're out of school. But basically action drives character. That if you behave in certain ways over and over, that becomes who you are. And that's really exciting because basically what I say is that there's a process to living with confidence, and I did it. So I'm socially awkward. I still am socially awkward. I'm the person at the cocktail party who doesn't know how to lead the conversation. And I read these things on the internet and I try to be better, but I just accept I just am one of those people. But now I can say that. And I mean, I never would have admitted this years ago, but now I just say that, oh, it's one of those things about me. And what's exciting for me about what I do is pulling together research from across science. So that in doing that, I'm talking with self-compassion, which is Kristen Neff's work. And one thing I love that she says, which is that we are connected to other humans through our, basically, this is my characterization, through our humiliations, that everybody's a screw up and has bad days and does dumb things and everything. And so I see now my social awkwardness as a sort of charming quality that connects me to other people who screw up in other ways, who can't flirt or can't speak in front of a crowd very well, you know, and that allows me to accept the stuff about me, the good and the bad, the ADHD, the talking too fast, the rambling, forgetting what you said. And now, so on, if I had been on a radio show, well, we didn't have podcasts really 10 years ago so much, but a radio show 10 years ago, and I forgot what the question was, I would panic. Now I just say, oh, I forgot. Did I answer that? Because it's okay. And that's a great step for me.
So if we were going to apply the big 5 personality dimensions to Amy Alkon, so ocean, openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So on a 1 to 7 scale, openness to experience.
I would say 6. I won't eat crickets.
Oh, you don't eat crickets? Okay, yes, all right. I'm there with you. So conscientiousness.
I'm very conscientious in some ways. Being a person with ADD, see this nice curtain back here? See, I identify with what's behind you, except that mine's about 300 times messier. Oh. My very sweet boyfriend last night installed that.
I see, so we didn't have to look at. Well, this is my office at the Skeptics Society office, and it's. I mean, you must get this a lot. These are books I get. This is just the last couple of weeks of books to review. Yeah. I was thinking, you know, you and I write these positive books about how to change yourself, make the world a better place. Should have named it "We're Doomed." Now what?
This is my boyfriend's an introvert, and so this is his philosophy is basically we're doomed. I like that, the dark view. I'm like Pollyanna, and he's I don't know, like Sasquatch with a depressive
so extroversion,
side.
Introversion, you're maybe a little on the extroversion side, right? Or no?
Oh my God, I'm an 11 out of 7.
Right.
Here's one other story from my relationship. So my boyfriend, you know, he finds it bizarre that I want to talk to strangers. So we're at Trader Joe's, this grocery store here, and we're kind of in a rush. And he says, don't talk to anyone. And he sends me off for something. And he passes the aisle where I am as I'm hugging the manager. So he just shook his head.
We're never getting out of here.
This is what's so interesting, individual differences about people. But more and more they're seeing, you know, people, I think, can change their personality in some way through action. I think Fraley and Hudson maybe are doing research on that. And what's his name? I like this guy. Christian Jarrett is writing a book on that now, on how you can change your personality. And what's important to me is I have a saying on my printer, don't short the science, but don't long the science either, because no one will understand it if you write some big complex paragraph. But to not go beyond the bounds of what the findings are, and to explain when you don't have adequate research. And that's the exciting thing about continuing to develop as a science writer. I was doing a column on shaving and body odor. And I looked up these studies, and the studies were just crap for various reasons. And so I told the readers, I'd already worked on it a lot. I told the readers, basically, well, I found some studies, but the sample size is too small, which means it might just be chance this effect they're finding. And so, here's what you can do. But I don't have any tasty science for you this week, because I'd rather give you no science than give you stuff that doesn't have good methodology behind it.
And so then let's see, agreeableness.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Disagreeable. See, the ADHD part, that must be, I don't know if that's under neuroticism or the agreeableness.
No, well, I find it. Let me just say, I find it a. I mean,
you strike me as an agreeable person, but on the other hand, I would never charge somebody for their time of calling me in the middle of the night or something like that. Takes some.
Well, that's see, I just interrupted you. What is that show? See, that's conscientiousness, I think, because I have a strong sense of justice, and it's not just for me. So I am a costly punisher, even though I got that. I got paid for this. I got Smart and Final sent me $100 gift certificate, and that only took me actually maybe about 10 minutes to write an email and make an annoying phone call. So
that's great.
It's kind of fun. And
so you
and
would put that under a conscientious thing to do, not a disagreeable thing. Like, I'm going to stand up and fight back.
Well, I don't think it's disagreeable to fight back,
right.
And that's the thing. That's a mistake I think people make about manners. I'll say something on Twitter and someone will be like, "Oh, you wrote a manners book." And manners to me doesn't mean rolling over. And people confuse manners and etiquette, which are those picky wicky rules, where you should put your fork. I don't know. Don't stab the person next to you with it. Be kind as you're eating. Don't show people your esophagus as you're chewing. That sort of thing. Have
right.
empathy.
Right.
So.
And then neuroticism.
Neuroticism. Might score high in that in some levels.
Well, this brings to mind, I don't know how much you followed the Jordan Peterson phenomenon over the last year or so. A little, yeah. So his thing is kind of doling out advice to a certain extent. I mean, his 12 rules for life is right there in the title. And one of my editors and I went to his live event last weekend here in Thousand Oaks, Southern California. And, a lot of his stuff, like rule number 1, stand up straight. He has this whole thing about the lobsters, and, there's a pecking order. We're a social hierarchical primate species. And, if you don't stand up for yourself, if you're spineless, people are going to walk all over you. Well, a lot of the stuff is like, well, yeah, that's kind of basic, introduction to making yourself a better person. I mean, make your bed, clean your room.
Can I interject on the stand up straight thing? So here's the difference, I think, and I haven't read his book, but between me and other people. So people can say stand up straight. What I do is I go into it deeper, because I have spent over 2 decades making advice practical, because stand up straight isn't enough. So I have a whole chapter. My favorite chapter title, and one of my favorite things in the book is your fears are not the boss of you. It's not what you feel, it's what you do. And what I say is that we're all afraid of things, but being afraid is not reason enough to not do something. And so I do this all the time with things I'm afraid of or uncomfortable about. I just do them. I tell my fears basically to fuck off. And I find ways also to make myself be automatic, to be like a robot. And so one way is that writing the blank page, oh my God, it's just a horrible thing. It yells at you. You're not funny. You have nothing to say. Go lie down. Clean out your fridge. Be useful. And so I have a timer. I write to a timer. It's on my computer, and it's 52 minutes. And then I take a 17-minute break so my default mode brain can process stuff in the background. I go wash a dish or something. But those 52 minutes, I could write, I'm an idiot, I have nothing to say 500 times, but that would seem really, really unproductive and depressing. And so what I do is I just start, and I read something, and I think about something, and I tell some jokes on the page. And then so often I get into it. It's that Mihai Csikszentmihalyi thing. I had to train to say that for 3 years. The thing he calls flow. You get into a flow state where it's this wonderful state where you're just so into the work, time just drops away. You forget that you've been working, and it's a joy to do. And so that's where you get by just doing, by just turning on that timer and writing and making yourself do it. And, do you have feelings? Oh, poor you, screw those feelings and just do it.
Right. Yeah, there seems to be a real need or hunger for just a handful of things I could do to make myself better. I mean, that's kind of like at Peterson's event. It wasn't political. You know, he's very politically supercharged and accused of being, a spokesman for the alt-right, or the alt-right love him or whatever. There was nothing really political in his talk. It just seemed like this kind of stuff. Like, what can you do to make yourself a better, stronger, more attractive person?
Right.
And there's a lot of evolutionary psych in there, and a lot of it does seem to be this, just do something. It's doing more than thinking about it. And that admiral guy, I forget his name. He has a famous TED talk about that. It was a graduation speech for make your bed in the morning. That guy. I don't know if you've read, you've probably seen that speech or whatever. It's like, make your bed. You call that small wins, or whoever
small
calls it.
wins. This is based on research, classic social science research by Carl Weick. I love this. Small wins says, if somebody wants you to cure world hunger, that's really big. You can't. It's just overwhelming, and you go watch TV or something. But what's really, really motivating for us is to have some small win. So say that you are a guy and you really do poorly with the ladies, and you decide you're going to have some courage and go over and chat that girl up. Say that she is just a nasty bitch, and she just spurns you in some humiliating way. Well, that's horrible, and it makes you not want to do that to the next girl. But if you look at this, look at what was good in it. Okay, you had no courage yesterday, and you had a little courage or a lot of courage today. Well, how cool is that? So you look at that and you say, like, I did well, I scored, okay, didn't work out. And this is part of a kind of thinking that's goals versus systems. A system is, for example, I want to get healthier, and a goal is I want to lose 10 pounds. So system is bigger. And so if you have the goal, I want to lose 10 pounds, and you eat a cupcake, well, you suck. But then if you eat the cupcake today and your general system is I'm going to be healthy, you can say, okay, I'm human, but I'm going to, go to the gym tomorrow. I'm going to eat healthy tomorrow. And if you lose the 10 pounds, then, your goal is dead. But I want to be healthy is a persistent system that you can apply to your life. And that's a very important thing, to have these things so you don't have ways out of things, and don't find yourself getting really bummed out when you fail, because you're invariably going to. It's just, the human condition.
Mm-hmm.
We suck on some level every day.
Well, here I'm reminded of Jamie Damore, the Google employee that got fired after that controversial memo. He went through the big 5 personality dimensions and showed that men and women differ on the different dimensions, and that one of them, for example, the last one, OCEAN, and neuroticism. It's meant as a technical term, but in our society, you're saying women are more neurotic, so all women are neurotic. Is that what you're? It's like, oh dear. And, he was on Rogan, and Rogan's going, why don't you guys use a different term? It's like, it's too late. It's already in the literature.
Right. That's the problem. And so I always try to explain those things. There's actually a good description of psychoticism in David Buss's A Dangerous Passion about jealousy. Mm-hmm. Can't quite remember what it is, but he explains, and I always sort of follow his lead in my column to say, it doesn't mean, you're Norman Bates.
Right.
And because people, there are these misnamed things. And ADHD is one of them, by the way. I love this idea that it's a deficit. It's named, deficit is right there in the name, but it's not a deficit of attention. My attention's like a Super Bowl. I have 35 squirrels running around in my head doing different things at all times. And I take Adderall. It helps them sit down and behave themselves, and it helps me focus on my work. But I find ADHD, again, it's a feature. And it has some costs, like that, I've begun to, when I lose my keys, I look in the freezer. So I've invariably been thinking about something else and put them somewhere as I was doing something.
Right. Right. So, to what extent we know that these personality dimensions are at least 50, 60% heritable, but that leaves half or so that you can adjust from your environment, including creating your own environmental conditions that changes your personality.
Right. That's
extent.
So important.
Yeah. So, another thing that Peterson got in trouble for was saying, women need to learn to be more disagreeable like men. Like when you go in for the raise, or, you're climbing the ladder, being super nice isn't always the best strategy. Maybe trying to be a little tough-minded, or, whatever the right adjective is. could actually be, as a strategy, more helpful.
I completely agree with him. Women are way too agreeable in a workplace, and the fact that you have a certain personality, that you have a propensity to behave certain ways, does not mean you have to continue behaving that way. We have so many ways we reshape ourselves. I live in the capital of plastic surgery, unless that's Brazil, where we might be a close second. But why can't you reshape your personality? Decide that. Reshape your behavior. Don't behave the way your personality is. I think that you brought up something too about environment. That's an important thing too, to make your environment work with work for you in changing your habits. But this thing about women, we have what's happened basically. I call it feminism now calls for women to behave like eggshells instead of equals. And I find that so disturbing.
Mm-hmm.
We have more ease in our lives and more opportunity than ever before. And you have all these women being, oh, I'm triggered, I have hurt feels, and all this other stuff. The workplace is not a picnic for anybody. Guys get teased and harassed. And also guys are competitive in a way where they sort of play the nines with each other. Mm-hmm. Guys, they are much more comfortable in groups and with hierarchy than women are from very young childhood on. And women are in dyads where men are in groups. And so the fact that you, as a woman, are probably more comfortable in a dyad and probably bond with other women. And this is through research from these great sex differences researchers, the late Ann Campbell, Joyce Benenson, Marianne Fisher, Tracy Vaillancourt. They find that women, basically bond through vulnerability, try to be agreeable, try not to stand out. And so that's not necessarily the best option in a workplace. So because you came in with that personality, think about how you should present yourself to get ahead. Women are notoriously poor at the salary area. Mm-hmm. So I had a dad who negotiated real estate deals. He sold all these little doctor's offices and things in horrible neighborhoods in Detroit. But I watched him and listened to him negotiate. So I was very good. I syndicated my own column at negotiating deals with papers. People would get a pittance of money, and I negotiated these deals. People were just amazed sometimes at it. And I just don't negotiate, quote unquote, sorry, like a girl. And I'm just saying sorry because I hear all those un-PC people going to put 1-star reviews, or the PC people going to put 1-star reviews on Goodreads about what a horrible person I am. For that, and for the worst is I suggested in Good Manners that women treat men who hit on them that they aren't interested in with dignity. And oh my God, what a horrible person I am.
You got hammered for that.
Oh my God, yeah. Some guy
how should a woman, according to them, treat a man who approach or hits on them?
Well, the idea is that a man shouldn't hit on you if you're not interested. I mean, it's crazy. This is a story of a guy on a train, a crazy guy. This woman was really rude to all the guys on the train who hit on her. And you know what? If you go out in public, people might talk to you. These boys, asked her what book she was reading, and she didn't really want to be bothered. Well, okay, but you know what takes less time is to treat them with kindness and dignity. Dignity is treating people as if they have value, and said like, oh, I'm reading this thing, but I have to read it for work, and I'm sorry I can't talk right now, because I'm really in a rush or whatever. Instead, she was nasty to them. Mm. And then she was nasty to some guy, some crazy guy with a bike. Maybe he wasn't crazy. He's just, he seemed pretty crazy, with the angry guy with a bike on the train late at night from Long Beach all the way to downtown LA. This is not a train that is filled with people. And so that guy, he wasn't just a boy, a teenage boy. He screamed at her and got in her face. Now, should he have done that? That's not nice. That's not right. But the thing is, had she treated him with dignity when he hit on her, she might have been safer. You're unsafe by treating people, attacking people. We feel about verbal attacks the way we do about physical ones. So that guy felt attacked. He went through the whole physical reaction we do when we get attacked, and he fought back in a very ugly way. Mm-hmm. And so people thought, well, he shouldn't have hit on her. That's just ridiculous. And the thing is, you're going to encounter people, you're going to engage with them in a way that's kind, and you put yourself at less risk. And also, it just makes for less fewer hurt feelings and a nicer world, a less ugly world, if you're just kind to people and let them have their dignity.
Sometimes I'll respond to nasty emails from anonymous people, and I'll write them back.
Am I losing you?
No, I'm here. I'm here, Amy.
It said connection lost.
Oh dear. Okay. I think maybe this is a good point to bring up. One of the most controversial issues in decades, really, the whole Me Too movement. And I'd like to get your thoughts on this problem we seem to have of distinguishing a continuum instead of this kind of categorical black and white thinking that there's just Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein, and anyone who does anything is in that category. And we seem to be having this difficulty of seeing that there's a spectrum of, really criminal behavior, bad behavior, just not so nice behavior, clumsy behavior, geeky, just uncouth behavior or whatever. The workplace, in the academy, and so on. It seems to be everywhere. And say something like Aziz Ansari's story. This was just seemingly a bad date, and he was, just kind of pushy.
Oh, right, yeah.
To the guy in the workplace who makes a comment about the woman's dress or whatever. And now it seems to be this minefield where these companies are scrambling to try to find what's the rules. And there was something about Netflix issued something about, they're the biggest television production company in the world now. It's unbelievable. So they have now rules about, like, people in the workplace, how long a guy could stare at a woman, like no more than 5 consecutive seconds.
Oh, wait, can I stare at a guy's ass? It's just maybe it's both.
It's mostly, technically it's both directions, but we know what the problem is. So that, it's really the guys that are being hammered here for this. And, in hugs, workplace hugs, that it has to be sort of above the shoulder and no more than just a quick boom like this. How this would ever be enforced is beyond belief. But this does seem to be something along the lines that you work in of how people interact with each other and the feedback you get, and being confident versus being overconfident or being rudely confident, and responding to people in some kind of respectful way. And we seem to be having something of a social crisis now of how to navigate male-female relationships. And this also touches on evolutionary psych, because there are differences in how men and women respond to each other.
And see, this is a big thing. We have so much, there's so many people who deny these differences. And James Damore, it's so outrageous to me that he was fired for basically telling the truth, for just laying out what the studies say. And, you see these people, there's a law professor named Kingsley Brown who brings this up about the workplace, that men give each other shit in the workplace. This is what men do. They look for your Achilles heel, and they go for it. Whatever feel sort of you're not that great at, they poke fun at you for that. And so a woman's Achilles heel would be her looks. That's what we're sensitive about, because women across cultures, are preferred for their looks by men, where women go for men who show a willingness and ability to provide and high status. And guys don't care about women's status. There are those funny studies where, the woman driving the Bentley or driving the Fiesta, the guys don't care. It doesn't matter. Right. It doesn't matter if she's a barista, where a woman's not going to date a barista if she's a company president. So if guys tease women about their looks, so if a guy does this to you once, the way I see it, there's just an encouragement for women to be victims and to think like victims and act like victims, which encourages people to victimize you. Someone says something to me about my outfit or something, I'm going to laugh because I have a sense of humor and I feel powerful. If you don't, you tell them to stop. They might do it again because people are jerks, and sometimes, especially people who are socially not that with it, they might not really understand that in a way where it causes them to stop. But if they keep doing it, then it's harassment. That's when you go to HR in a sane world. In Amy's world, if I created the world the way it used to be, where you can hug coworkers and everything. This is just an insane world. And basically what it's often being used as is an excuse to get men, to victimize men. And an example is Nicholas Wolfinger. I can't believe my boyfriend's calling now after setting up my podcast. So I'm going to unplug the phone in case he thinks I'm being murdered by someone. Okay. Nicholas Wolfinger, he told a story. He's a researcher, I think, at University of Utah. He told a story about proposing to his wife in a strip club, and he spent a year or two fighting this through the Title IX, the horror, those kangaroo courts. And then after that, I think he spent $14,000 in legal fees. Because he told the story of proposing to his wife. He wasn't hitting on somebody. He wasn't grabbing anybody. But somebody decided to use this against him. Joe, what's his name? Galloway, the novelist, is another example.
Yep.
People are
Canadian.
having their lives ruined over nothing. Sometimes it's mere accusation. And I find this really terrible. And it's terrible for women because if you can hire someone in your company and you can hire a man versus a woman seems like the volcano at Pompeii ready, waiting to explode. And so you don't know that the individual woman's not going to be one of these women who does this. So maybe you hire men. And so I think it's very bad for women, very bad for men. And it spills over into the social world where people have these ideas, you shouldn't do this. That Aziz Ansari case, she needed to leave and say no. Women need to pre-plan. This is a big thing in both in Good Manners for Nice People who sometimes say fuck. In the moment, we are not good in the moment. There's something in French, they call it l'esprit de l'escalier, the spirit of the staircase, where you figure out that wonderful remark, that snappy remark to say to your lover after a quarrel as you're going down the back stairs. And so you have to pre-plan for what your behavior is going to be on the internet, what your behavior is going to be on a date. I mean, really, is it unexpected that if a guy says, come up to my apartment on the first date, that he doesn't just want to play chess?
Right.
So if you want to play only chess and not, naked chess or whatever, sorry, that's sort of a dumb example, but then you don't go up. And in fact, I advise that first dates should be cheap, short, and local. Those three things, especially for people who are trying to be more confident, who maybe are desperate and will show that. You can hide your desperation. You can act undesperate in a short period of time. And then also you don't start projecting who the person is, onto them rather than knowing them.
I think the critical response to that would be from the other side. Women shouldn't have to do that. We should live in a society where men respect women and never do that.
I shouldn't have to earn a living and pay rent. Someone should give me a house with a helipad in Bel Air. I'm a nice person. I don't litter. It's just unrealistic. People now, I think we live in the most comfortable and easy time in human history, the least violent. You're the least likely to have something horrible happen to you medically or with violence than at any other time, especially we in North America. And I think people are responding to this by becoming, basically giant pussies and saying, my life must be totally comfortable. In fact, I think it's Greg Lukianoff of FIRE who makes this argument, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education. They argue for free speech rights. They defend people pro bono on campus. But he says that people basically are conflating physical discomfort, emotional discomfort with, physical abuse. And it's just so stupid and pernicious, and it makes us all into these huge weaklings, sorry, go ahead.
Well, so the idea of safe spaces is the very opposite of what a cognitive behavior therapist would say to deal with things that bother you or you're afraid of.
Exactly. And I put Nassim Taleb's work in my book, the anti-fragile, that things become better with stressors. And so an example of how I just use this in my own life, I was at the airport. I'd gone to San Francisco to give a talk, and I saw at LAX, there were, I had a carry-on, which is rare for me because I travel with a sarcophagus, usually for my clothes. But I saw 4 flights of stairs and an escalator. So I took those 4 flights of stairs with my little wheelie bag, which was kind of heavy. So I would have some physical stress because our lives are so easy. We need that. Our ancestors would have been lugging around logs and all sorts of stuff. Our later farmers, you did all sorts of physical labor, and we are weaklings. So I try to be less of one.
Yeah, bone needs to be hit and stressed and under gravity. I ride a bike, and I'm told I need to do more physical stuff on the ground that where my bones are being stressed, because swimming and cycling is too not physical enough.
Right.
And so that metaphorically speaking, that applies to say engaging with conservatives on college campuses is going to make you stronger. This is what I tell my students at Chapman, that, I assume most of you are pro-choice. Oh, yes, everybody's pro-choice. Okay. If Ben Shapiro was here making his 4 arguments for pro-life, could you rebut them? They don't even know what they are. It's like, okay, see this, you got to watch Ben Shapiro's videos defending the pro-life position. And if you can't refute them, then you're not really a pro-choicer. You don't even know what you are.
Right. And that's what Christopher Hitchens said, that he always knew the other side better than they did.
Right.
And that's really, really important. And this thing of engaging with other human beings, you hear people say stuff about Republicans. My parents are Republicans. They're not evil. My dad wouldn't jaywalk. They just have a different point of view. And Jordan Peterson and some of these people, I see, this characterization. I haven't really looked at his work that closely, but and I disagree with him on some things, but I mean, this notion where you call somebody racist, this is a new, it's just a way of stamping out speech. And I think it's much more helpful to engage with people, like the whole Sarah Huckabee thing where they threw her out of the restaurant. Mm-hmm. I am not a Trump fan. However, I think that that's an ugly view. I think that this idea of be mean to people, this actually hardens people's resolve against your side. If you engage with people instead, try to see humanity in them, try to connect with them. This is actually some of the research I put in from David DeSteno and Pier Carlo Valdesolo in Good Manners, where they did this research where they show that people wearing the same armband, strangers in a research lab, that they are more likely to do benevolent things for the person who has the same color armband. And so if you just identify, it's so simple. You think about somebody. So Sarah Huckabee, she must like chocolate. She must like dogs, and really, I don't like anything about the Trump administration, but, and I'm not a Democrat either. I'm libertarian. But I can look at people as humans, and I just find that more productive, even when I find them to be very disagreeable on many levels.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about some of the other points in your book, Unfckology, the basic stuff that people really care about, like losing weight, getting fit, getting to the gym every day, and what nutrition, just basic stuff like that. What do you recommend that people do? You wake up at 6 in the morning. The night before you're going, I'm going to the gym, and at 6 the next morning, you're like, never mind.
Oh no, I love that you asked this, because this is really important. I tried to put in a lot of productivity tips like this. And so one very helpful thing that I got from Art Markman, who's a psychologist at U of Texas, is to build your habit into your environment. So a way I did this, I needed to remember to take vitamin D in the morning, and I was forgetting every day. And so what do I do in the morning? I make coffee. I go grind the beans. So I drop the bottle into my coffee beans, into the jar, and to get to the scoop and the beans, I had to go through the vitamin D. So it took me very little time, actually, to start actually taking my vitamin D every day. Now I remember every day. And so to do something, you build that into your life in a way. So to do things that you don't like doing, you should have one goal. People make a mistake. They have New Year's resolutions, plural. This is stupid, because you can't do all that. It's sort of like the life version of cognitive overload, of having too many things on your mind. You have one thing you do, and you have a system and not a goal. So your goal isn't to lose 10 pounds. You have a system that you're going to be healthy, and you have a lot of stuff to support that. And you have friends support you. Tell your friends what you're doing, that part of it's losing this weight. You can use one of those apps where you fill out colored things. I like to have it, I like things in real life, not on the phone, but where you check things off every day. I do this all the time, where I have check boxes and I count. I have things that I have to do. So like if I'm going to clean I don't like cleaning up, but what I do is I have I have to pick up 10 things, and that gets my house a lot cleaner. You do these things that are ways that are pleasurable for you, where you get some kind of small win out of it. 10 things. I did it. I'm done. I'm cool. I did my little chore thing. But you didn't say, I'm going to clean my living room. Oh my God, that just sounds like a horrible task. Horrible, horrible task. And so the habit change thing, another important thing is to just be a robot about it. So I don't let myself off. There is no, I'm writing to a timer and now I'm going to go on the internet. There's another thing I decided to do was to become stronger. I know this stuff that you're talking about with the weight-bearing exercise. So I do high-intensity interval training on a bike, but that doesn't build muscle. So I started doing push-ups when I make coffee. I make coffee like 5 times a day, just 1 cup. And so I do 10 push-ups, military style. I do 10 core crunches, and I do 10 sit-ups with weights on my feet. And so it holds my feet down. Not important, but
you mean while the coffee is brewing, you just drop to the floor and do it?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I have a whole process. I have an AeroPress, and so I have the kettle, and then I foam milk, and I grind the beans and everything. So I do that, and there's no getting out of it. There's no, I feel sick. Even when I feel like crap, I mean, if I had to throw up in the middle, I'd probably run to the toilet. And if I don't do, like, say that the phone rings and I have to get the phone, then I have to give myself back the push-ups or sit-ups or whatever I didn't do. And so that not letting yourself out of it. Oh, here's another example. Amazon, we talked about this. Okay, writers, oh, we're psycho. I used to check my Amazon page to see what my stats were like 600 times a day. This is very unhealthy. So I've been asking people, if you read my book, please review it. It helps the authors. And so I had to check it just a little bit because somebody said, oh, look at my review and see if you like it. It's sort of ungracious to ask them like, hey, could you review the book? And then you don't look. But I just stopped looking. I didn't look for like 6 months other than just recently when I had to do that. And so that's an example. And you tell people, I just told people, look, I hope you understand, I can't look, but there's somebody I couldn't tell that to. So, you just do it. And the just do it thing is so, so important. And then also when you fail, because you will fail, that you don't say, okay, I screwed it all up. I'm just going to, I'm going to just say screw it all to this thing. That you let yourself go, that you just say, you let yourself go in an emotional way where you say, okay, I screwed up. I'm human. I'll do better tomorrow. And the one other thing I want to say too is this, to not make things so impossible for yourself. Give yourself realistic goals. You might need to retune your goal. That's okay. You aren't a failure if you decide, okay, this is like gave myself too much of a goal.
What's reasonable for weight loss?
Well, it depends on the person, and it depends, so are you eating low carb? Do you have a family history of, diabetes and putting on weight? Not everybody's going to be the same. Where there are individual differences. And that's one of the most important things I learned from this guy who talks to me about stats, is to be very mindful of individual differences. I don't know if you can see my dog. She's getting a little antsy here. Hold on. Here, Aida, sit down. Okay. And so, one of the things, so in my own case, for example, I try to eat healthy because I don't have a I'm going to lose this weight kind of goal. I have a system, but what I do is I love sugar. We all do. I eat low carb, high fat, but about once a week I will have a tiny little Haagen-Dazs ice cream.
Oh, I know those. Those are really good.
Because I have to not have a life without joy and pleasure.
Right.
And so there are times when you do stuff like writing the book. It was such an intense book to write. It was much harder than I thought. I joked that the book tried to kill me, kept trying to kill me. But so I stopped drinking while I was writing the book because I could not afford that bit of brain fog, that sometimes I would get as a person who is basically aspiring Irish but drinks like a Jew, and in the morning. And then I started drinking again because I love wine and I'm not a teetotaler or anything. But it's just those things where you realize, okay, I got to shift a little bit. And by having self-compassion, you can manage to do that and be honest with yourself and not be a fundamentalist either, where you just stick to some goal to the point where you can't really stick to it.
So the idea of failing, you don't want to go down the original sin where you're just going to feel guilty all the time. How do you shed the guilt? Like, okay, I didn't make it my goal this week. Then what?
What do you mean? How do you, so you didn't do well this week?
Well, people feel guilty, and then that leads them to give up. Like, I might as well not bother with the diet anymore or whatever because I failed this time.
Well, I think that you start again the next week. It is this thing of just do it. And then once you get a small win under your belt, you have a day where you ate well. That's a small win. And you see that and you use that as the impetus to keep going forward, to keep doing it. And you try to do things where you reach some kind of goal within your system. So you maybe lose a little weight or you're just eating healthier. Because remember, like a lot of people, there are people who don't necessarily have an easy time of losing weight or they won't lose a lot. And so those people should look at how they're eating and what they're doing. And also, sometimes it's that people aren't eating the right kind of diet for weight loss. I think that, at least for me, it's very important to eat a high-fat diet. It feeds my brain. Mm-hmm. I think about all those years I dieted in New York. At one point, I just thought, oh, fuck it. If people don't like me, I'm going to eat. I started eating a burrito, a chicken potato burrito at Bubby's Diner with a Coke, not even a Diet Coke. And I started losing weight. And you're also not bitchy and, starving all the time if you eat like that. And that's a really great thing. So, part of this too is, if you're trying to lose weight and you're eating this sort of low fat ascetic diet, you're not helping yourself because you're going to have these feelings. Our body and minds are so connected, and that's what's really important. Part of the stuff on willpower that's so cool in the book, this is from the work of Michael Inslicht and Rob Kurzban, and not all together, and then Michael McCullough from U of Miami and some others, where basically willpower actually seems to be our mind saying, are you doing a really dumb thing that's going to cause you to, die in the Stone Age? Because we have Stone Age minds still today in our world of iPhones and drones and all the rest. Are you doing something useless that will cause your death? Or are you doing something productive? And so you can fool your brain. Our brain's actually kind of marvelous and dumb at the same time. If you give it a reward, give your brain a cookie, basically, is what I say. So you give yourself some food. You've worked hard for an hour, so you have some fatty food, or you masturbate, or you have a massage, or you do something that's pleasurable, so your brain feels like it's getting a reward, even though it's not directly getting one from this work that you did. So when I write, for example, I'll make a mess on the page, and it's very depressing. And then I have to, keep going at it to sort of chip away and make it coherent. But at first, it's not very rewarding. It's just a mess. And so the food thing, all of that, like, oh, I'm going to go have some fatty steak. That feels good to your, and it fools your brain into thinking that you're not doing something useless.
Are you pretty convinced, as I think I am now, from Gary Taubes and Nina Teicholz's books, that the problem is sugar, refined flour, and that kind of stuff, grains? We should be eating meat and butter, and like now I get yogurt. I don't want non-fat yogurt. That misses the point. I want the whole fat. I want the real stuff. And steaks are okay, and so forth. Although Joe Rogan always makes the point about what kind of red meat are you eating? Pure game that he shot. I'm not going to do that, but a cheap burger from a McDonald's is not the same as a lean steak from a nice steakhouse, say, for something like that. But that does seem to be the problem, that the dietary industry or whatever, these organizations that issue these pyramid, we might as well call them pyramid schemes at this point, they don't seem to have the science behind them. And I've just been amazed at how long it's taken for the culture to catch up to where the research really is.
Well, this is very exciting to me, Nina. I know both Nina and Gary. Gary and I were friends in LA and hung out. And so I was lucky because I got sort of a preview of all the stuff he was writing and started eating this way in March of 2009. I haven't had a slice of bread since that time. And it really is life-changing how much better I feel. And I never eat lean steak. My boyfriend cooks for me. I don't cook. I heat. He leaves me plates of food. Like he's this giant Detroit guy and leaves me like a mom plates of food in my refrigerator. It's really nice. And my thing is always, if we're going to have steak, it has to be really fatty steak. I prefer ribs and bacon, the fattiest stuff I can get, because then I feel better. I eat liver. And so part of the problem,
but
too.
Look at you, you're skinny.
I've people said I have Michelle Obama arms, my push-ups, but also being thin. Well, but you end up not, I don't have to, exercise. Taubes has a good piece about how exercise isn't the way to lose weight. And I said that actually
makes you
on Joe Rogan.
Makes me hungrier when
I know, makes me right. And he said exercise, and I couldn't remember what the piece said on Joe Rogan. I got all this. People love to be outraged on the internet. They sent me like, "How dare you?" I'm like, I was honest. I didn't remember it. It's a good piece. Go read it. I referenced it. You can find it. Google whatever. But eating this way. God, I'm so much healthier. Doctors don't know it. So my doctor was so hilarious. The obese nurse sent me this letter and called me. They thought I was going to die in like a week because my cholesterol is 303. They put that in red.
Right.
Well, I'm over 50. High cholesterol is protective for women over 50, number one. My triglycerides, I think, are 34. And my HDL is 87. So basically, I'm about as likely to die of a heart attack as I am to be kicked in the knee by a unicorn. But my doctor is the last to know. And they said, eat a low-fat diet and exercise. I just thought, oh, thanks. I
know, same stuff. I like you. I think you're on Kaiser, right? And I've been on Kaiser for 25 years. And then, my wife and I moved to Santa Barbara. And there is no Kaiser in Santa Barbara. So I went through Blue Shield. I just ended up at some random doctor and So we did the blood test, and yes, my cholesterol is always just a little high, like 230, 240. Okay, got to do the statins. And it's like, okay, no, wait a minute. I've been reading this stuff, and, I could tell he hasn't read any of this stuff. And he's like, listen, every cardiologist in America takes statins. They just do it. Just do it. Okay, so fast forward like 6 weeks later, I get my blood work back. I go back. He's not there. I got some other doctor who's from out of the area. He says, listen, let me tell you something. I wouldn't take anything. Look at you. I rode my bike over there. You're healthy. You're strong. You're eating well. Just go ride your bike. Don't worry about it. I'm like, same clinic.
Yeah, statins are so damaging. I learned the Protein Power. I think your neighbor, Mike Eads, he has this blog and he blogged about statins. And so thankfully, I keep my boyfriend off of them. The doctors always want to give men, especially statins. And there's what do they say? There's no change in all-cause mortality for women. So, women, there isn't a benefit at all. And there are a lot of costs for taking statins cognitively, your muscles. It can cause diabetes. It's just so insane. There are these few heart patients with terrible, horrible conditions who might have to take them. But this is one of those cases. You mentioned before trade-offs. Is the cost of taking this drug worth the benefit? And are you even getting a benefit? And that's one of those cases with statins. And I wanted to mention, so I won't forget, the thing about the way we eat, the meat we eat, what I've come to realize, and it's not my thinking, it's from reading all these people I read in the science-based health area. It's that we need to supplement the muscle meat we eat with the crappy parts of the cow, the brains and everything like that. And this is, I think, a really important supplement to the work that Nina and Gary have done. They probably say this too. And just to add one thing about them too, I wanted to say this. For me, what's exciting, I talk about this whole thing of like, oh, do you have credentials? Here are two people. It's so exciting. Yeah. Investigative science journalists who have revolutionized the way we eat. Doctors will tell you, as my doctor does, and she's an older, respected doctor, that my primary care Kaiser person, that I should eat a low-fat diet, and do all these things that the evidence does not support. Whereas these two investigative science journalists put out this work, got the public to change their ways, and now doctors are starting to come around, seeing that these gains, you see this on Twitter, you see these doctors tweeting, here's my patient, look at my patient lost 200 pounds, from eating this low carb, low carb, high fat diet. And then the doctors start to look at it. And that's not how medicine should be, but that's how medicine is.
Right.
And that's the thing where people should not be so credentialist. You should look at the science somebody does and judge them on that, and not say, oh, do you have a PhD, which is a part of joining a certain kind of system that I want no part of. And part of the problem too is that everybody's a narrowcaster in that system. That you have to be, if you're in this one area, you stay there. And so people are not doing cross-disciplinary work. They use measures from one area when they're studying something that they haven't personally checked out. They don't know the problems with them, because they're stuck in their own little narrow fenced-in area instead of being cross-disciplinary as science should be, but as science careers don't really allow.
Right. Let's talk about changing your personality. To what extent can most of us do this versus those on the, say we have a bell curve, and maybe those that are 3 standard deviations out on either side on whatever dimension you're talking about, maybe they can't. The person that's drug addicted, that's an alcoholic, they simply don't have the same kind of volition that you and I might have, or control over our behavior. Is that a conclusion you reach from your research, that most of us can, but not everybody?
Oh my God, I have a great example. So Amy Dresner, before my book got to the publisher, she edited every word of my book. She swears that I gave her a seizure with William James, but that chapter. But she wrote a book called My Fair Junkie about her decades of addiction. And she's a great example of how you can become conscientious. So I think that she's the real Amy Dresner now, and the drugs got in the way. What happened was she just, she's the way all addicts are, lying, doing, dishonest things, it's a typical profile. And then what happened was she got arrested for domestic abuse. So she brandished a bread knife at her husband, and he rightly called the cops because nobody, people laugh off domestic abuse against men. She doesn't, and I don't. It's serious. And so she was arrested, and this changed her life. She was assigned to what's called community labor, basically community service. And this is the best thing that ever happened to her. So she thought, oh, I'll get in a thrift shop in Silver Lake and I'll just, have to do my time. They put her on a Hollywood Boulevard work crew, sweeping up poo and condoms. And she had been a Beverly Hills princess, and she developed a work ethic. And from that, you get meaning. This is a thing I realized, and something I incorporate, like that between my little breaks between my work, especially if something's really crappy, I'll like clean a molding or something, these small wins from doing something productive, even something that's not very interesting, you feel like you have done something meaningful. So she felt that, and she really changed her way of being, her personality. Now you can change your personality through, to some extent, because like you said, it's genetic. So we have propensities, but there's been recent work on this, and I forget by whom, on conscientiousness. It's probably by Hudson or Fraley or Brent Roberts, one of those guys, might be Roberts, where basically if you act conscientious, that it increases conscientiousness. So you make your bed in the morning. So I agree with Peterson on that, and you do these things, you clean things up. You call people when you're supposed to call them. You send a thank you note. You do all those things. You behave with integrity in those moments where you could do otherwise. And it really helps to plan that.
You are as you act. You become a conscientious person by acting conscientious.
Yeah. And so you change your default behavior from being low conscientiousness because it's pleasurable to be conscientious. You get good props from other people. You feel good. You're not trying to put one over on people. And so that's a way that you can change your personality.
I think of, I just wrote a column on free will and determinism in Scientific American, everybody's favorite topic. And, yes, we live in a determined universe. There's a causal net that, except for quantum physics, quantum indeterminacy. But we're all subject to these causal vectors out there in our genes and our environment and so on. Yes, that's all true. But we're also part of the causal net, and we can be aware of the factors influencing it. So what I call the compatibilist position, what's called the compatibilist position, is that that volition comes from the fact that I can be aware of the things that can influence me and push me in one direction and then change them self-consciously. So if I know I'm an introvert and I go to a party and I know the typical Shermer is going to stand there in the corner, come on, Shermer, walk over there and join in the conversation, and then I do it, and then it gets easier the next time and so on. Is that not changing you're still determined, yes, but changing the determining factors to push you down a different pathway?
That's a great example. And that's one of those things. You are not letting your feelings be the boss of you, and you have a better life because of it. So this book, it's about having all the opportunity that you can in life. If you go for those things, if you talk to those people, so often, so many things in my life come out of my speaking to strangers, and that's a really important thing. Just taking the opportunity by not allowing your fears to guide your behavior.
Was this the book where you had the little form for your dates to fill out?
Yeah, that's I don't know what page that's on.
Really funny.
I have a big. Do I have that around here? It's called. Do you want me to describe it? Or you?
Yeah,
it's
describe
in the early part of it's in this chapter 2, probably like 20 pages in. You might be able to show people.
Oh, here it is. Our date customer satisfaction survey.
Right. And so I did this. Okay, so I got all confident and I was doing better in my life. I could ask for something in a store and not think that someone was going to hit me with a broom or yell at me and. But I was still having problems in the guy department. Basically, I used my newfound confidence to go after guys in the way a golden retriever pursues a hot dog down a hill. I frightened the poor men. But I didn't know why it wasn't working. And so, I did this own little rough test, very small, way too small sample size. But I would go to this place in Soho and write because they had ample outlets and ample cute guys. And so I made this, it was basically like a hotel survey, a customer satisfaction survey. Thank you for choosing me, Amy Alkon, like some other psycho would do this, as your date. I know you have many choices of dates in the New York metropolitan area. Please help me serve you better in the future by answering these things. And there were things like, was your date clean and odor free? But the important one was, would you go on another date with this person?
Right.
Why or why not? And everyone really was horrified, except for this one really sweet professor from Princeton who came over to my table and sat down. We had gone on one date, and he shook my hand and ran down Canal Street where I lived afterward. It was really humiliating. And he said basically that I took all the fun out of dating because I did all the work. I would ask guys out. I was very forward, and I realized, Cialdini's principle of scarcity, I needed to apply that to my dating life. And the thing is not just you can pretend, you can act hard to get, but eventually I became hard to get. I became somebody who wasn't going to settle, who didn't need to chase men. But that was what I found out from that whole thing. And it was a very valuable experience doing that. Plus, it was fun. It was like the free advice thing where I would do these things. People let sectors of their life be very unfun and boring. So when I give Amy a check, I write some weird thing to make her laugh on the envelope. And it's always different. She used to post them on Facebook. It's that little like life decoration that makes this stuff, like if you're doing something where you're trying some goal, that you do things, you reward yourself. Oh, that was another habit. I was trying to remember all the habit stuff. Rewards are so important in this, and that you get rewards, from like maybe right after. So if you're going to go to the gym, reward yourself right after that if you can, because then maybe you buy the latte at that place where it's like $7 or something that you don't normally let yourself buy. So you're giving your brain a trade. So it's not just, you're doing all this horrible hard work. And also one other thing too about habits is that for most people, we have what are called chronotypes, which is the time of day that we're, sort of ready to go. And most of us are larks, so we're best in the morning with really hard stuff. There are middle of the day people who get no cute bird name, and then there are owls who are better at night. And so generally, if you're going to do some hard cognitive stuff, I wouldn't work out beforehand because you've already tired yourself out. You've told your brain, we did all this stuff. We didn't really get much back from it. Do the hardest thing first. Don't be on Twitter like I am too often early in the morning. I just do it to wake up now and I get right off. But it's really best to do your writing really early in the morning and to not be doing the stuff that's you could do at any time. And then, working out. Work out if you can, work out at the end of the day. So you're not taking away from the other stuff you need to do unless you need to lose weight, in which case maybe you want to work out at 8:30 in the morning.
Let's kind of wrap up by pulling back and looking at a bigger picture politically at a lot of these issues. As a libertarian, you kind of split the difference between left and right. You're probably socially liberal, economically, fiscally conservative. That there seems to be a lot of pushback against a lot of these kinds of arguments about lifting yourself up by your bootstraps, stand up straight, go in and ask for the raise, don't be a pussy, no safe spaces. The left definitely does not like that. And why do you must get some of that, politically more pushback from the left and the right on those particular issues?
Yeah, people think that things should be different. That, here's an example. I made some joke. There was a guy who wrote about his friend who wanted to date. He had some startup, and he would only date the most beautiful women. And beauty was the only thing he looked for. And then they would sort of be awful and dump him and not be partner material. And the guy said he needed to have beautiful women to impress the people he was going out to do business with. And that's true. Men do determine other men's status by who they're with, and it's very important. But the guy said, wouldn't he be better off if he had a woman who was less beautiful, but that, he had staying power with her and everything. Anyway, I made some joke about the women. I'm not going to remember it quite, but the women being, that the problem is that they, that they're so, I'm not going to remember, that they're so dumb that they dislocate their shoulder. I can't remember the joke. Damn. But anyway, so I get all these letters. So I
Yeah.
make jokes about everyone, myself included. My boyfriend says about my ADD, do I have your divided attention? I put that in the column. I'm the first to deprecate myself. Anyway, these women were irate, and I said, you never ever wrote before. You never wrote before to complain about any other joke I made. And I used the example of John Callahan, my late quadriplegic cartoonist friend. He felt that it was dehumanizing to never criticize, or not criticize, but to make fun, never poke fun of disabled people. He would go around Portland and say, see my new shoes on his motorized wheelchair. I hear they're very comfortable. And so I said to these women, some of whom actually came around, that I said, to me, the problem is treating women, like they can't handle anything but this coddling and kid gloves.
Mm-hmm.
You never made a peep about any jokes I made about men, and it's just women I can't say stuff about. I love the people who said, oh, don't you know that there are beautiful women who are smart? And no, I'm a total idiot. It's like,
so it's a sort of infantilizing of women.
Yeah,
treat
and
them
so
that way.
that's what's happening. And basically, college is becoming nursery school with beer. And I see this more from the left. The right has their own bugaboos that they pick. That might be one of those racist words that
bugaboo.
Yeah. Oh, no, I don't know the origin of that, so it just sounds like it's bad. So I apologize for that if I said something terrible. But see, the thing is, I don't want to hurt people. And the thing I disagree with Peterson on, I don't agree with mandates that you call people who are like gender fluid. That I don't think the state should say, you have to call them whatever they want, or you will be cited and fined or whatever. But I think it's kind. If you want to be called there or Ger or like whatever, I will try to remember that. Like my neighbor who used to be Roger, who's now Mona, I try to say her about Mona because that's respectful and kind, even though I knew Roger as Roger for like 25 years. It's a little bit difficult, he wears skating skirts and a bob now. So, that's the thing. And I think that it's an excuse for unearned power over other people. All this stuff, these rules now that people violate, there are people who know the rules very carefully, and that, you violated this. And it's the racism accusation is used to shut down speech, and I find, for me, the Martin Luther King judge people by the content of their character. That's the way to go. And we're really going away from that. I think we're going backward as a society. And I
identity politics is the exact opposite of that.
Yeah.
Judging people very much based on the color of their skin, their gender, their sexual preferences, and so forth. The right, David Buss, is fond of saying that evolutionary psychology is an equal opportunity offender. The right doesn't like it for their own reasons,
right.
That we're animals, we're apes, what? And that we have these, baser instincts. Although I've tried to appeal to the right to that extent by showing, in a way, this idea of original sin, and that we're born with these natures, that there's a dark side. Well, that's true. We know that. We have these inner demons that evolution created for very good reasons. You have to be a badass and defend yourself, and sometimes violence is necessary in our ancestral environment. And jealousy is there for a reason. All these emotions. You have a whole chapter on emotions, the importance of emotions. Yeah. In fact, let's not skip over that. I mean, the importance of emotions for driving behavior are super important in this research.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And emotions are basically, it's getting really hot here.
Yeah, it's hot. Yeah, I know. No fan.
My hair is frizzing. See, you're a guy, so you don't have to worry about that. Emotions, basically, they're motivational tools. They're so important. It's so important to see them that way instead of as some kind of interior decoration for your mind. And so Randy Nesse, who is a psychiatrist and evolutionary psychologist, is so great in this area. He talks about how fear, for example, is like physical pain, that you put your hand on a stove, or that's the example I give. You put your hand on a stove. Ow, wow, that's hot. It's telling you to do something. So your emotions, the quote unquote negative ones, are telling you change your behavior, do something different. What you're doing is not working for you. It helps you to better mate and survive, the imperatives of evolution. And that's where we can use our emotions. We can understand when fear is stupid, for example, by understanding evolutionary psychology. And that's the foundation of everything I write, because I use evolutionary psychology to check things. Well, why would this make sense? For example, Arthur Aaron's, I was reading recently on this self-expansion model. Okay, well, why it doesn't seem to have an evolutionary foundation. I shouldn't go into that. I'll stick to the stuff in the book. But basically, with evolutionary psychology, using this, well, okay, why would this have made sense in an evolutionary environment, and does it make sense in ours? It's called mismatch theory.
Right.
So say that you as a guy go to a bar and you hit on a woman and she is just really mean and humiliates you. Maybe she even throws her drink at you. This is awful, and you've just had this whole group of people witness you. Well, witness you being humiliated. Well, we evolved in these small bands, basically consistent, 25 to 50 people, according to Irvin DeVore and some other anthropologists that we were with most of our lifetime. So the story about you traveled. Everybody knew you had a history. This is who you were.
Your reputation.
Right. Reputation was very important. And so, but now we live in these vast transient societies. So the emotions that you have in that bar that tell you, oh, go crawl under a table and die, and really don't do anything else, those emotions are stupid because what? There's a bar 2 doors down. Nobody saw you be humiliated. Wait till the water or whatever dries and go there and hit on somebody new and then hit on somebody new. And if you're a socially awkward guy, you're going to have a harder time with women than the guys who aren't. So accept that. Accept, like I say, I'm socially awkward. Admitting that, and this is part of the book, say what your emotions are, say what you're feeling, identify them, identify the problems you have, because then you can be sort of more matter of fact. Oh, I'm socially awkward. I'm probably going to sort of not get out of that conversation well. Oh, well, whatever. Or you try to do better, and that's a very important thing. And just understanding this evolutionary mismatch, it allows you to really look at your life and see the stuff that doesn't make sense that you're doing and to say, oh, I'm just going to override that. That's dumb. I don't live in a band of 25 or 50 people.
Right.
And I can go hit on 50 women. And so if you're the socially awkward guy, maybe the other guy has to hit on 4 women, but maybe you have to hit on 12. Just accept that. Some guys are better at basketball. Some guys are better at soccer. Some people like me, if you throw a ball at me, I do the rational thing, which is duck. So
find something you're good at and do that and ignore the rest. Well, let's finish with just one last heavy question, because it's been in the news with Anthony Bourdain and others that, suicide seems to be this strategy that could not possibly have evolved. Why would you take yourself out of the gene pool by self-murder, as it's sometimes called, and all the things you've been talking about in your book about dealing with issues like depression or whatever, weight problems and so forth. What do you say to somebody who has hit the bottom of the barrel and just feels they can't go on anymore?
Well, first, to answer what you were saying before, I think that sometimes emotions that are adaptive, these feelings as motivational tools, they become maladaptive. And I think that suicide has to be one of those cases. And actually, I think for somebody depressed, I think there are a couple people I really like on that. First one is Randy Nesse. He has all his papers on his site. They're very readable. Jonathan Rottenberg is another guy who wrote a book called The Depths. He himself was depressed. And then, I had some other idea of a person.
So the idea behind depression is that it gets you to change your behavior, to do something different, and also to get alert people around you, I'm in trouble.
Exactly. And so this is what Randy says. And so depression can be adaptive for those reasons, that it causes you to reflect on what you're doing. You look sad, so this causes other people to be empathetic and come take care of you. But at a certain point, so we're mostly, it seems, resilient. That we get up, we evolve to get up, pick ourselves up, and go on after that. But for some people, it just hangs on for a point of time where it's just no longer productive. It's very counterproductive. And maybe it has to do, I think that it probably has to do something with brain chemistry in many or most of these cases.
Right.
And so, to explain to people, to make depression less mysterious, to say, okay, you know what, you probably have a brain chemistry problem. This is like, and maybe it can be solved, maybe it can't, but this is like, you have this disease and we have this pill for this and it seems like it might help you. So it seems less mysterious and thus hopeless to tell them that. And then the other people, I think that many people who are, think that they're in some kind of depression that makes no sense, that there actually is sense to it if they see, okay, this happened to me. I'm having this period where Randy says this stuff of like, you get sad. This causes you to slow down and be reflective. This is very important. It's part of the process. It's what you do. It's part of the process of getting better. And that reflective time, use that to change your life. So that's a positive thing if you say, okay, I'm going to look at this. And there are ways, I put Pennebaker's work on expressive writing in the book. This seems extremely helpful. This is James Pennebaker, and he had people who, his first study was people who had some kind of trauma happen to them, health trauma maybe. I can't quite recall, but he had them write about their trauma, and this helps you. Putting stuff down on a page, you have to organize your thoughts in a way you wouldn't if you just thought about them,
right.
Or if you just vented emotion, you punched a pillow, which actually catharsis we've seen doesn't actually work. Thanks, Freud.
Yeah.
But the good news about this, so because I try to be so practical, I am not going to write one word unless someone's paying me for it. Not one.
Right.
So I am not writing anything down. Well, Sonia Lyubomirsky found you can talk into a tape recorder.
Okay.
And Pennebaker advises doing 20 minutes of writing. Oh my God, that sounds horrible. There's somebody else that found you could do 2 minutes. And Pennebaker, I asked him about this, and I said, oh, well, aren't you leaving a lot of unprocessed stuff? And his idea was, oh, that's a good thing.
This is supposed to change mood?
This helps you process some of the feelings that are just roiling around in you.
I see.
It helps you make meaning out of them.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
And that's really, really important. And that's some of the way that you can go on, because basically your emotions are saying, oh my God, you did this thing. It made you really unhappy, because the unhappy is supposed to stop you from doing it again.
Right.
So if you just are unhappy and you figure nothing out, well, you're going to just do it again. So that time, it's like homework time. It's emotional homework time, and you should use it because, okay, we've all done dumb things. I write in the book, I live with this guy. He lit my copy of Honoring the Self on fire. I stood there and watched it burn. I later bought another copy. This is Nathaniel Brandon's book, who's a therapist who's dead now. But and I actually read it instead of watching while it went up in flames. But these are the things that we do, and you have to reflect on, well, why did I just stand there? And it had something to do with this fearful, timid person I was, who wanted to be liked more than I wanted to have self-respect. And so I changed that and began acting like a person with self-respect, even when I was afraid that somebody wouldn't like me. Now it's sort of like someone bitch, I'm like, and.
Well, that's a good place to wrap it up on Unfckology. I love that title. And Amy, this is really good. A field guide to living with guts and confidence. You have it. You have it.
Thank you.
You have both.
This was wonderful.
Whatever you were like, in your 20s is the new you. So, no, really, seriously, science help. I like that.
Thank you.
That's very good. Lots of good material there. So thanks for coming on, and we will post this shortly. And
oh, great.
Yep. And
I love this. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Bye.
Now go turn on the air conditioning.
Oh my God.
It's so hot.
Thanks.
Right.
I know.
Bye-bye.
Bye.